So now we're getting to where we just need to get some wiring out of the way. I think I'm gonna only be changing the passenger side, but the process would be the same on the driver's side. The passenger side is what's leaking for me. So now essentially we need to go around, you need to loosen this ground so you can get the harness out of the way. There's a couple other things you'll have to undo right here with a popper tool on this line. And then we're gonna go through and take off all of the ignition coils and go ahead and unplug those. And from there, once we have everything out of the way, we should be good to go ahead and take that valve cover off. It would be a good idea to go ahead and get some paper towels and put them in these holes. And also, you don't want to damage this gasket if you help it. You're not really supposed to reuse it. I'm gonna go get some new ones, but you don't absolutely have to, especially if it's not old. This one's only a couple of months old for me, so I think I may reuse it. But you do want to stuff some paper towels down here. Make sure you don't drop any nuts. If you do drop a nut, a bolt, tool, or anything down there, it's bye-bye. And that means that now you have to take off this manifold or take off the head. If it fell into the combustion chamber, it can blow up your engine. So nothing goes down that hole. One of the harnesses you need to get undone is this. I think this goes down to your alternator. This is where your pry tool comes in. Just reach underneath it and wiggle it out. This one. There we go. You also want to get your ground. Now go through and unplug your ignition coil wires. I would go ahead and number them. I believe I already have them numbered from the last time I was in here. Yeah, so a piece of painter's tape works just fine. As you can see, it just shows 5, 3, whatever cylinder it is. So that way, these can go in backwards, and it happens all the time. And people will get their stuff back together and be like, why does my car not run good? And that's why. So unplug these 3, unplug this harness here. There's probably a couple more things I need to unplug, but I'll get there when I cross that bridge. So. Pull the ignition coils out. There's a 10mm bolt on the top of each one. These break all the time, and when they do, you have to buy a new valve cover. So with that said, let's do these by hand. Wow, that one is already loose. And then they just pull out. Oh God. Okay, so damn. One of the things I said before was that if your seals go bad for the spark plug, you'll get oil in them. So this is a perfect example. Also, how I'm gonna fix this without buying new valve covers, I'll have to show you. That's a surprise. I guess you're learning this as I'm going. At least the oil's clean. All right, let's keep pulling these and see if I got lucky or if all of them have oil in them. Okay, so this one's dry. So is this one. Okay. You can mix these up, so it doesn't really matter. They can go back in whichever orientation. They're all the same. I normally mark them anyways, but in this case, it doesn't really matter. Lots of oil back in that back cylinder there. Okay, it's like I said earlier, that the spark plug seals do not you cannot buy those. You have to buy them. They're molded into the valve covers. So that's not very practical because the valve covers are a couple $100. So we're gonna try and have a fix for that. You're also going to want to unplug these 3 fuel injectors. Same thing as I mentioned before. Go ahead and label them. Well, that one just fell off, but yeah, go ahead and label them so you know which way they go back. They can go backwards, and if they do, it's not gonna run right. You're gonna have to take all this back apart again. So squeeze the tab, pull them off. Be careful not to break them. Mine look a little bit different because I do have some 650cc injectors installed. You can just swing those out of the way, tuck them somewhere else. So the passenger side is definitely the more difficult of the two, mostly because there's no plug for this big harness and it's kind of just going to be in the way. So essentially what I'm going to do is just try and zip tie up this bracket and just get it as far out of the way as I can, and that's just going to have to work. The only alternative to that is to completely remove the engine harness, which is not very feasible. And lastly, before we start taking bolts off to get the actual valve cover off, you're going to want to remove your crossover tube. In your car, it will be black unless someone has replaced it for the Z1, but it's very easy to come off. You do want to be careful though, because it's fairly fragile. Not the one that I have, it's why it's been replaced, because the last one broke. But the black OEM crossover tube will crack, and if that's the case, then just go to Z1 or eBay and get an aftermarket crossover tube. Another thing that will break very easily is the nipple coming off of the valve cover. If that breaks, then you will be replacing a valve cover. So on these valve covers, you have 4 10mm along the inside. You have 1 on the front and the back, and then you have 4 along the outside. These are going to be a pain to get to, I can already tell you. Let's go ahead and start on the easy ones. Let's do all these by hand. I already broke those 2 loose. Let's get this one right here. And the back one, it's kind of hard to get to. Okay. So I'm starting to think that the valve cover itself probably isn't even leaking. It looks like it's just all coming from this bad spark plug seal. If that's the case, I still need to replace the valve cover gasket, but it is what it is. For the 10mm hardware on this farther side that's harder to get to, this is where a 1/4 inch ratchet with a 12-inch extension will come into play. So you can reach down and actually get these, because like I said, they're really a pain to get to, and they're harder to get to the further you go down. If you haven't been able to tell right now, valve covers on VQs are a major pain in the ass. Once you get all 6 of the bolts through, you're just gonna have to finagle the valve cover out of here. It's pretty tricky. I'm considering taking off the VVT solenoid. I've done that in the past, and to allow it to be able to be installed easier, because it kind of gets in the way, and with that there, you have to push the valve cover back and then forward, and you don't have a lot of room to go back. So use 10mm bolts on these. They're 90 inch-pounds going back on. We'll walk through that later, but make sure you break these loose with your hand first, and be very careful not to mess up the gasket. They're fairly cheap. They break sometimes whenever you take them off. Let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so I had to think of an idea of how to get all of the oil out of this one spark plug tube. Can't see in there, but it's full of oil. So the solution I came up with was a syringe. So let's see how it goes. God, it worked. Jeez, dude. I don't know where to put this now. So I went ahead and took a plastic razor blade or a metal razor blade. If you use metal razor blade, be careful not to gouge, but plastic razor blades typically work better. But I went around and cleaned the gasket surface, mating surface all the way around. Put some brake cleaner on a rag, and just went all the way around. It's really important to get most of the oils off of this. That way your new RTV will seal properly. If you have oil still on it and a bunch of junk, then it's just not going to stick, and you'll have the same problem, and you have to do all this over again. So I'm gonna go ahead and clean this off a little bit more, and then I'm gonna run a very small bead of RTV around here. According to the service manual, the only place it actually wants you to put RTV is in this corner down here, a small little glob, here, and then a little bit around this back corner where they typically leak. But I'm going overkill, and I'm just gonna put RTV around the whole damn thing. So luckily I never get rid of anything, and I have a whole bunch of extra parts and junk. So I've come to the conclusion that I'm going to use this other valve cover that I have, for the reason because the spark plug seals are in much better shape, and this came off of a VQ that did not have any problems with it leaking into spark plug holes. So this particular engine got rod knock, and that's why I had this laying around. The only predicament that's going to bug me is that this is black and my other valve cover is red, but I really don't care. That's just what we're going to do. At this point, what I typically like to do is take your ultra black RTV, and I'll do a small bead around inside this groove. Very small, it doesn't have to be very big. And then I will take my gasket and go ahead and push it inside all the way around and let that set up, just to give it some extra protection. And from there, then we'll go and put some RTV around the head on the car and then put it together. Okay, that's what it should look like afterwards. It's kind of a mess, but basically I just took RTV, went all the way around it, and then smoothed it down with my finger, and I also put some on the tops of each one of the spark plug tubes, as well as on the inside of the seals. So this is not in the service manual. This is just overkill for me because I'm sick and tired of doing valve covers on these things, so I'm trying to make sure that it's not gonna leak anymore. I guess the next step is to go ahead and put it on, which is gonna be tricky. You're just gonna have to be very careful to set it in there and not smear all the RTV all over the place. I'll try and record it as best as I can, but we'll see how it goes. Well, that looks goofy, doesn't it?